What exactly is Eldarium? It's a metal, sure, but it's unlike iron or steel. Where does it come from? Who made it? Why did I become so frustratingly invested in finding out the origins of an item in a video game? Let's find out. So Eldarium was introduced with the Isle of Siptah expansion, which hit early access in September 2020 and fully released in May 2021. It's derived from the Elder Vaults located around the map and provides a strong platform for tools on the Isle. Eldarium is very much an endgame metal, being on the same power level as Obsidian or Black Blood, likely for balancing reasons. However, it's also one of the most mysterious metals in the game. Iron, steel, gold, silver, they're all pretty self-explanatory. Even star metal has some roots in reality, evidence supporting the use of metal from meteors goes back to the Bronze Age and possibly even further. So, to find out exactly what Eldarium is, we should first see if it bears any similarities to real-world metals. Unfortunately, this is pretty difficult to ascertain. In a horribly inconvenient oversight, Funcom did not include a periodic table in the world of Conan Exiles, which is just frankly terrible behaviour if you ask me. There's no hint at its chemical properties or anything like that, we only have one thing to go on. Eldarium is an incredibly hard metal. This is kind of complicated by the fact that it's easier to work than steel. I am getting some mixed messaging here, but then again I know nothing about blacksmithing. So, based on the item description and the tool's strength and durability, we can safely say that Eldarium is a hard metal. It also weighs 0.13 units per bar, making it on par with star metal and hardened steel in terms of weight. It's light, lighter than steel or iron, but it's not absurdly light compared to other materials of comparable quality. So what can Eldarium be compared to? Well, in the world of hard metals, there are only a few comparable options. Those are tungsten, titanium, and chromium. Most of these are brittle metals with high tensile strength but low impact resistance, prone to shattering on impact. This rules out tungsten and chromium immediately. Chromium can be made stronger in an alloy, and the Eldarium we craft is indeed an alloy. However, the item description indicates that creating this alloy with hardened steel is actually weaker than true Eldarium, which we are incapable of smithing. Chromium is also a silver metal, which rules it out as being Eldarium. Titanium is extremely strong, but it's actually softer than chromium and tungsten. It's also the wrong colour, so that rules out titanium, and as I mentioned, tungsten is extremely brittle and thus will shatter on impact, which just doesn't match with the actual strength of Eldarium that we see in-game, therefore ruling out all of the comparable real-world metals. So if it's not real-world metals, what about fantasy and undiscovered mythical metals? Well, there are too many to count in terms of these mythical metals, though a few do jump to mind. Adamantium might be one of the most obvious, but I don't think it's accurate. Sure, it is an incredibly strong metal, but it's practically indestructible. Eldarium tools and weapons, whilst very strong, can and eventually do break, thus ruling out adamantium, although maybe the pure Eldarium could be more like adamantium, but then again, we do know that Eldarium decays, and I couldn't find any indication that adamantium does the same. There are absolutely tons of other options: Byzanium, Dimeritium, Dracolith, Mithril, Vibranium, Runite, Orichalcum, etc. However, that being said, these metals are either too strong or too weak to be Eldarium, alongside other smaller factors like being the wrong colour, or even just being too varied in their depiction to nail down a solid archetype. So if it's not based on either a real-world metal or a fantasy metal, then it's a unique creation. Wonderful news, but that doesn't tell us where Eldarium comes from. Silly me thought I might be able to find out by reading item descriptions. Do you think I could? Well, let me read you the description of a piece of decaying Eldarium. This decayed chunk of metal was recovered from the interior of one of the vaults on the Isle of Siptah. The origin and construction of this metal is unknown, and the secret of its smithing has long been forgotten. So even whoever writes the game descriptions doesn't know where it comes from. Okay, so it looks like we need to go deeper. What exactly does the word Eldarium mean? Well, I think we can leave out the ium at the end, as that just seems to be a common modifier for many types of fantasy metals. I looked at the word Eldar, and to my surprise, it actually came back with something interesting. For context, the Elder Vaults that Eldarium comes from are the previous homes of some of the Elder races, old beings that far predate modern humanity. Eldarium is referred to as an alien metal, though this is more likely due to it coming from these ancient races rather than coming directly from outer space. So upon searching for the word Eldar, I actually found something quite interesting. Eldar, or the Asuryani, are a faction of ancient humanoid aliens from the Warhammer 40k universe. It also refers to the name given to elves in the Tolkien universe before they undertook the Great Journey to Valinor. I'll admit I'm not particularly up to scratch on the lore of either Warhammer 40k or Tolkien, but it seems that the name Eldar has been used to describe a few different types of races, though Warhammer 40k seems to be the only race ostensibly described as ancient. Of course, the word Eldar sounds very much like Elder, and seeing as the vaults are populated by the Elder races, it may just be a simple bit of wordplay. However, seeing as Tolkien and Warhammer are both very popular fantasy materials, I wouldn't put it past Funcom to making a little nod to either of those properties with the name of Eldarium. The final and most interesting point for me actually lays within the achievement related to crafting an item using Eldarium. This achievement is named the Shadow Out of Time, which is very interesting indeed. For some context, the story of the Isle of Siptah is already a very Lovecraftian one. During a war between all the Elder races, a group of what I presume to be humans contacted the planet Yuggoth, the home of the fungoid crustacean-like Migo. The Migo are incredibly advanced, specialising in surgery and neuroscience. Yuggoth is an incredibly important planet in Lovecraftian lore, and it's used as a stopping point for the Great Old Ones, so Siptah is already heavily linked to Lovecraftian entities in the cosmos. As for the achievement The Shadow Out of Time, this refers to a novella by Lovecraft himself of the same name. The story tells of the great race of Yith, extraterrestrials capable of space and time travel, alongside switching bodies with hosts and essentially possessing humans. Without getting too off track by covering the events of the book, the Yithians are implied to be extremely intelligent, to the point they have amassed a library city filled with the past and future history of many different races. So what evidence do we have so far about what Eldarium actually is? Well, we know that it's a unique otherworldly metal, extremely hard but somehow also easy to work. It's described in-game as an alien metal of unknown composition, and it's found within the Elder Vaults, ancient dungeons that hold some remnants of the Elder races. The Isle of Siptah is heavily tied to the Migo of Yuggoth, and semi-canon information implies that the great race of Yith are also present at least somewhere within the Conan universe. As an alien, highly advanced metal, the creation of Eldarium could only really be achieved by either the Migo or the Yithians. The Migo specialise in surgery and neuroscience, which does somewhat rule them out, though they are likely still capable of creating something like Eldarium. The Migo are also physically present on the Isle of Siptah, as are their experiments with mutated humans, which again reinforces that point of them being more interested in science. Seeing as they do seemingly prefer to lean towards science rather than engineering, I don't think Eldarium came from the Migo of Yuggoth. So what about the Yithians? They're not physically present on the Isle of Siptah, and looking into their history it may be obvious why. In the distant past, they abandoned their original bodies for a species living on primitive Earth. There, they built a flourishing civilization until they were wiped out by a race of ancient polyps. The Yithians survived by projecting their minds to an insectoid race that will one day inherit the Earth, and that may be the answer to our question. If, before they were wiped out, the Yithians chose to settle on the Isle of Siptah, Eldarium may indeed be a remnant of their civilization. To be able to settle, they'd need land, which Siptah provides, protection, resources, and of course, they'd need infrastructure. Buildings, civil engineering, all built by tools. The foundation, of course, for good tools is good materials, and thusly I believe that Eldarium was made by the Yithians as the first step towards building their civilization on Earth before they were wiped out by the flying polyps. Now don't get me wrong, I could be completely incorrect, or I could just be looking into this too deep. Of course it's possible that I am correct, but it's also just as possible that Funcom just made the metal as a reference to Tolkien or Warhammer, and thought nobody will really care that much about some green metal, yet here I am trying to find out the origins of pixel metal within a video game. My curiosity really knows no bounds.